I will only present our ERHIN project that we are implementing with SECODAS and the International Union of Tenants. And this ERHIN project is about promoting and developing CSR in the European affordable housing sector. So I will go through the main components and maybe tell you what we may expect from you or what can be interesting for you and for your members, I think. First, we have a CSR roadmap for the sector, and I will explain later what it entails. We've also set up a stakeholder forum at European level. We will have European Responsible Housing Awards. And lastly, we've set up an online resource center, and you have the website address there. So these are the main components. And I will now go into more detail. What is this CSR roadmap for the sector? It basically aims to provide a general framework on what the sector sees in CSR and in responsible housing and what we want to promote for the sector. And it also aims at identifying key priorities for housing federations to help and support their members in implementing CSR. And we've seen the examples from BL earlier on. And this is this type of initiatives that we want to highlight. Of course, it's not a binding document or a binding commitment. It's more intended as tools, as a toolbox, as recommendations or guidelines to help you help your members. So the priorities that have been identified based on interviews that I've conducted with several federations and housing providers, there are the ones written here. So we have 6 priorities. The first is about awareness raising and leadership, not only towards your members, towards housing providers, but also towards partners and stakeholders, such as the construction sector, but also tenants, local authorities in general, etc. Then the second priority is about promoting and improving transparency and accountability, and that came up as a very strong priority and strong expectation from society and from local authorities and public authorities in different countries. Third priority is about developing stakeholder dialogue and partnerships, and that's what we will also discuss later on. Fourth priority is about supporting operational implementation, and we've seen again earlier on with the Danish case, Danish example, that they've provided also a lot of tools to their members. They've developed a guide or a checklist, and that's the kind of things that we also want to promote based on what already exists. The fifth priority is about the assessment and measurement of shared value, so of also social impact for communities, and we will discuss this maybe a little bit later. And lastly, the sixth priority is about recognition, because we believe that there's a lot of things that are being done today, but they're not maybe very visible, and they probably lack recognition from the general public, from authorities, from financial institutions, and there are mechanisms that start to emerge here and there, and I think we should take example from that and see what could be done to improve and increase this recognition. So this roadmap will be refined and should be endorsed by September next year. And so far we've done the survey and the preliminary roadmap, and now we're collecting feedback from federations and stakeholders. And so if you have inputs, if you want to participate in that, if you want to give suggestions, you're more than welcome. This is the first element. The second one is the stakeholder forum at European level. So we've gathered 12 organizations, and this forum is chaired by the International Union of Tenants, by actually Barbara, who is with us today. And we held our first meeting on November 7th. This forum should lead to a joint declaration on what is responsible housing, viewed by housing providers, housing federations, and their stakeholders at European level, and why responsible housing should be promoted at European level. And we will try to create a CSR charter as a voluntary commitment that can be signed by social housing providers. I don't know if you're familiar with the UN Global Compact, but it will be the same idea. So it's something which is quite light, but which demonstrates and shows that you are committed to CSR, and it sets a number of general principles. That's the idea. So we will try to get to that for the housing sector. All this will be delivered by May next year. So again, if you want to give your inputs or your suggestions, you're more than welcome. Third thing, the European Responsible Housing Awards. This is also about getting more recognition and giving more visibility to what is being done in the sector, because there are a lot of things that are great. There are a lot of very, very interesting projects that are not well known. So we will organize the first edition of the European Responsible Awards next year. And all your members, all housing organizations that are represented within SECODAS are invited to submit applications for good practices relating to CSR. They don't have to label it CSR, even if they don't have like a proper labeled CSR strategy, as long as it's a good practice that can fit in one of these 5 categories, they can submit it. And we will have a jury with the members of the stakeholder forum, because we think it's important that stakeholders also give their criteria for what is a good practice according to them. And so we will have the selection, and best practices will be gathered into a handbook that can be used then by others to get inspirations also. And the ceremony will be held on October the 6th, 2014, which is International Tenants Day, right, Barbara? And so the application forms are to be submitted between January and March next year. So if you want more information, I'm available later on. And I think it would be great if you could also mobilize your members and tell them about that. And I think it's a great opportunity for your members and for you to collect that. And this leads me to the last point, which is the online resource center. You remember, one of the 6 priorities that we mentioned was about supporting operational implementation. This means giving access to tools, to examples of good practices that have already been developed, because I think there is no need to reinvent the wheel. When something good exists, so you may as well try to use it and replicate before starting something from scratch. So that's the whole idea of this online resource center. We're collecting good practices and putting them online. Everyone, again, is invited to provide examples of good practices in any language. It does not need to be in English. And we are also collecting CSR reports, because there are a lot of CSR reports that are actually published in the sector. And surprisingly, I think probably many more than in comparable sectors. So I think it would be good also to show that to the external world, that people or organizations are ready to be transparent and accountable on what they're doing and their impact on society. So again, if your members want to submit good practices, or if you want to submit good practices and CSR reports, just send them to us and we will put them on the website. These are the main dimensions of our project. Again, I'm available afterwards for any questions you may have. But right now, I think I will leave the floor to our roundtable, because I think they have very interesting practices to share as well. And I think after that, we will open questions, I think, if that's okay, and if we're on time, of course. Thank you very much.